So my family, we moved here. We moved to the United States in the year 2000, which was I was 9 years old. It was both my parents and my older brother and me. We flew into Dulles International Airport, which is in Virginia, right outside of DC. It's a big airport out there, and the flight. I remember the flight over was horrible. I mean, we had to transfer in, I think, Moscow, and the whole thing took like 24 hours. So in between the layover and two different airplanes for however many hours and I was only 9 years old, so it was just horrible. But I remember when we got to the U.S., it was like, I felt like I was in a movie. I honestly felt like I was in a movie. The people are completely different. So my country is it's in Central Asia. It's Kyrgyzstan. It's in Central Asia. We're kind of like Mongolian descent. I think that's where like the Oriental look kind of comes from. We were actually part of the Soviet Union for a long time. So it's weird because like you look at me and you think Asian, which I am, but it's like our food is a mix of like Middle Eastern and Russian cuisine. And we speak Russian because we were part of the Soviet Union, but our own language is Kyrgyz. It's a dialect of Turkish, from what I understand. But yeah, so I mean, coming to the U.S., it was different because of the diversity of it. I was 9 years old, but I could tell that there was something different, something special about this place. I remember walking through the airport and just seeing all these different people, and it was a shock. In a good way. Because back home, everyone looks like me, and we have some Russian people sprinkled in, and they're like whitish Russians. And then when we came here, I had never seen anyone darker than me before, and I saw Hispanic people, Indian people, Black people, African people, and I remember just being like, what is this place? Like, where am I? Where did my parents bring me? The next big thing was, so my country is really poor, and I remember my dad's friend came to pick us up, and he's an American white guy. I don't know how my dad was friends with this guy, but he ended up helping us out. I remember he picked us up, and as we were leaving the airport, I was in awe. It literally felt like somebody was filming me, and I was in a movie, because we were riding in a pretty nice car compared to the Soviet vehicles that we had back home. And I remember I saw a Mercedes. It was a two-door CLK 320. I love cars. I remember because I used to play Need for Speed back home with my brother, and this was the car that I would use in Need for Speed. And I saw one right outside of the airport, and I like my mouth dropped. I was drooling. It was crazy. But yeah, when we got here, it was like we didn't understand anything. I remember, we didn't really have like a plan when we moved here, and so we stayed at an extended stay America, which is like a long-term hotel type of place where I guess business people stay, and we stayed there for like 3 or 4 weeks. And I remember my parents took my brother and me to a Walmart, and we got a bunch of we love playing soccer, so we got like cleats and a soccer ball. And my brother and I would spend all day, because we weren't going to school yet, we hadn't enrolled yet. So we would just hang out on this median. It was a median of a highway. It wasn't a highway, but it was like a pretty busy expressway. And in the middle of it, we're just playing soccer. And we didn't know any better at the time, I think about this now and I'm like, what are you, crazy, Like, can you imagine you're going down this highway and you see these two kids just like kicking the ball back and forth, it's like the third world mentality was still there, obviously still there. So I was 9 years old when we moved here. My parents enrolled me in the 3rd grade, which technically I should have been in the 4th grade, because I guess 9-year-olds are in the 4th grade in the U.S., but in my country you graduate high school in the 11th grade, not in the 12th grade. So yeah, it was a little different. So when I graduated here, I was 19 because of that. But anyway, I didn't speak any English. I remember the day that my dad took me to school. I literally remember the moment. I cried. And one of my close friends, Sean, who's still a friend of mine to this day, he brings it up all the time. He's like, dude, remember when the first day of school, you came in and you were crying? I'm like, yeah, actually I do remember that. But yeah, I didn't speak any English. I may have known maybe 4 or 5 words, and not even that. I mean, it was just like memory, you know, like how do you know, like hello. You don't really know what hello means, but you do know that that's how you greet someone. It was. Looking back, I feel like it was really difficult.
Let me see that.
What's up?
Let me see that.
See what?
You forgot?
Oh, let me see that. Yeah. So I did not speak any English, which was hard because I guess it was hard. I mean, I remember sitting in class like, you know, if school is for 6 hours, the only class that I understood was math because numbers are universal. So a lot of the day I was actually in ESOL, which is like, it's a program to teach kids who don't speak English well or at all. It's like English as a second language, I think is what it stands for. And I remember, like, you know, she would be like a group of like 7 or 8 of us, and we had a teacher, and we'd walk around the school, and she would point at things and tell us what it mean. Like I remember she was like, this is a painting, and it was a painting of something. And then once I developed a little bit of English, like once I started to kind of get the basics of it, I would come home every day and I would tell my dad, you know, oh Dad, like, you know, guess what I learned today? Guess what I learned today? And I remember my brother and my dad picked me up from school this day, and the phrase that I had learned that day was, let me see that, as in like, let me see that pen or whatever. And I didn't realize it at the time that it was 4 separate words. I just thought it was 2. I thought it was let me see and that. So I'm like, Dad, I learned this word, or these words, and I'm like, let me see that, let me see that, let me see that, for like, I mean, the entire rest of the day. And I'm pretty sure my brother really wanted to punch me, but he didn't, because he's older than me, he knows better. Yeah, eventually, you know, I mean, when you're young, I guess they say language comes to you pretty easy, but assimilating in the beginning was, looking back on it now, it was a lot hard. I guess at the time I didn't understand how difficult it was, but now I can see it was pretty difficult. Like back home, you know, you wear, like, everyone just wears like this. You have like 2 outfits. You have the thing that you wear every day, your casual, and then you have like your nice clothes that you wear to church or wherever it is you're going. You don't have like 5 outfits a day for the whole week, and then pajamas, and then no, you literally have like 4 pairs of clothes. And so my brother and I would wear the same thing to school every day. You know, I remember I had these blue jeans. I had a long sleeve yellow t-shirt because it was fall time, it was getting chilly. And my parents had bought me this vest from Walmart. And I just wore the same thing to school every day. And I guess it was good that I didn't speak English because I didn't understand. I wouldn't have understood it if my peers were making fun of me anyway. But I remember, so my best friend, so we lived in this apartment building in Silver Spring, Maryland, and I met this girl who was my best friend. She was, we had a couple classes together, and her name was Ileana, which I thought was the prettiest name I'd ever heard. I think I was in love with her back then. I remember, like, once I developed a little bit of English, she would tease me about it. She'd be like, well, I guess once we assimilated a little bit, she would make fun of me and say, remember those days when you were just this quiet little foreign kid who wore the same thing to school every day and you didn't have anything to say? And she would just, you know, tease me about it all the time. But yeah, it's like you don't know any better, right? Like, you come here and you do things how you know, and then slowly you learn, which I guess is what assimilating is. I think, though, the hardest person, I think out of my family, the one that had the most difficult time assimilating was my mom, because, well, my country it didn't really give a lot of power and rights to women back then. Like, I remember I had this memory when I was maybe 6 or 7 years old. We were standing outside of Osh, which is where we lived, which is the second biggest city in my country, and there was a pretty big, like, three-lane road that went by right by our house. And I remember standing up on that road with like a couple of my buddies, and we saw a woman driving a car, and we were all in shock because you didn't see anything like that. Women weren't allowed to drive. They didn't drive. not a lot of people have cars to start with, but even the ones that did, like women, you know, like my mom didn't know how to drive. So when we came here, she didn't speak English, she didn't know how to drive, and my dad is a very hardworking, go-getter type of person who is just always on the go, like a very, very stereotypical immigrant husband kind of guy, like very patient, kind of goofy, and you know, he's just always just very result-oriented. And so when we got here, like he would, oh my goodness, he used to deliver pizzas in the evenings, and then he would go, he would deliver newspapers in the mornings, early mornings, and then he would do any kind of seasonal work that he could do. Like, remember he would shovel snow, or go out and lay like salt before, you know, you ever see like those guys with the salt things who are getting ready, like right before a storm, like a winter storm's coming? Like that was that was my dad. You know, he was doing whatever he could, but the thing with my dad is, he wouldn't just do it for himself. Well, he would do it himself, but he would also expect others to do the same. So he wanted my mom to learn how to drive so that she could get a job, or she could help out with this or help out with that. And I remember he had his friend had this, it was a Chevy Cavalier. It was like a 96 Chevy Cavalier, which is a two-door Chevrolet. It was a convertible, but the top didn't work or anything. It was an old beat-up car. And he's trying to teach my mom how to drive, and my dad's really impatient. So my mom is in the driver's seat, my dad's in the passenger, I'm in the back, and they were just going back and forth. I mean, my mom is like, you know, she's very timid, kind of shy person, kind of like the opposite of my dad. And so yeah.
Can you remember any dialogue?
Huh?
Can you remember any dialogue between them?
Oh, I wish I could.
One or two.
Okay. Yeah. So something that I want to add is
yes.
how you brought up the bullying thing.
Yes.
That was actually a very traumatic experience in my life. So it was when I was in middle school. I didn't even think about this. I was I think I was in the 7th grade. We had bought a house. We had bought a townhouse, and so my parents were working very hard.
Now that's also another big story, that you bought a house.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you have to. That's also another huge.
Yeah.
Story.
Well, I definitely want to, because you know, I was talking about how hard my dad was working.
Yeah.
So I'm going to be like, you know, it's kind of like the fruit of your looms, or whatever the expression is.
Yeah.
So yeah, we had bought a house. We bought a townhouse. We're very happy, and you know, expenses were acting up. We're starting to, you know, buying a house is expensive.
Yes.
And we were getting older, so both of my parents were working probably like at least 12, 14-hour days every day. So I really didn't see him much, and I guess I was like 13 or whatever, a little bit older. Mm-hmm. So they felt more comfortable just kind of like giving me more responsibility, like taking care of myself. Okay. And my brother was in college, I want to say. I think he had just started college. Oh, this is really cool too. Mm. So my brother, he went to Johns Hopkins.
Oh.
Yeah, so, you know, coming from barely speaking the language in high school and then doing really well and then going to Hopkins is really cool to highlight too. So my brother was going to Hopkins and he was working at nights, and because that's how immigrants do it. Like I remember, this wasn't. If you ask my brother, he's not going to tell you that he enjoyed this. Mm-hmm. But like he would go to school in the mornings, he would go to work in the evenings, and he would bring all his paycheck home to my parents. Right? Like he wasn't working for himself. He was working so that we could have a house. We could do this. We could do that. You know, and that's how immigrants work. That's why we're able to achieve these things. You know.